Okay, good evening all.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, I know that I have to be careful and I'm in England how much I engage you. So I'm gonna try. I know that my first ever visit that I remember, actually it was my second visit that I came here. I was telling Shmaya today a little bit about, it was in 2005, June 2005. It was June 6th actually. It's my birthday, so I remember that day. June 6th, Chafei Sivan, Anyway, so June 6th, 2005. And I was speaking to a group from, I think it was Hendon. Am I close? Are we close? Are we there? We're close? Okay. Anyway, so students of a group. And I never, forgive me, like the Rebbetzin was speaking about when a New Yorker here is in town and out of town, what that means is a New Yorker is in town no matter where they are. So therefore, if I'm here now, that means that I guess we're talking about famines. So if I'm here, that means that I'm still considered like I am in town. So I didn't know anything about England. I didn't know much about it. And I didn't realize, I didn't have the sensitivities at all of different cultures and the way that people react. And no matter what I said here, I said a story, the reaction was this. I said a joke. It was, the only one time that I mentioned chocolate cake, and there was someone heavy in the audience that smiled, but I don't think it had to do with anything other than the chocolate cake. So I got a little bit used to the idea, whatever it is. So forgive me if I slip and actually try to engage you a little, but we're gonna try to make this work. Thank you for the introduction. What's that? Yeah, we got some good. Yeah. Thank God. Okay, so let's as we say, let's get cracking. Let's get started. So just a very quick introduction about myself. My name is Friedman, aka Rav Gav, originally from a place called Woodmere, New York. I've been living now in Israel for the past 24 years. I'm married, got a bunch of kids, and now I'm in England. Okay, let's start. Hopefully not permanently. I'm just for tonight. Okay, so here we go. So what we're going to jump into right now is just discussing a little. We just finished the holiday of Purim. Now you'll forgive me because I don't know everybody's backgrounds here. So if I say something that's above you or below you, then that's what I will do. So forgive me for that. But we just finished the holiday of Purim. Perhaps you pronounce it Purim. Others pronounce it Hanukkah. It depends how much you drank. But this holiday is a pretty powerful holiday, and the main theme of the holiday of Purim essentially is to come to recognize the fact God's hand in the world, to come to recognize that God's involved in every aspect of our lives. Now, we might not see it, and as a matter of fact, interestingly, I just heard I was in a place called Highland Park, New Jersey, 2 weeks ago, and there's a rabbi there by the name of Rabbi Malitsky, and he shared with me the following idea. I think he quoted someone, I just don't remember who, so I'm quoting him. Hopefully that's enough b'shem Amro for whoever he quoted. And he said the following: when you read the Megillah, the scroll of Esther that we read on the holiday of Purim, you're not allowed to miss even a word. You're supposed to hear every single word, every single letter, and if you miss a word, you should go back and read along with it to try to catch up. And the question is why? Why do you have to have every single word? You don't find that even when we read the Torah every single week or every couple of days every few days that we read the Torah. If you miss a word, you have to hear a certain amount, but every single word. Why are you being so miduyak, so meticulous, so detail oriented? What's going on? And he said a beautiful idea. He said the reason is because when you look at your life, and some of us have had more opportunities and less opportunities, depending how long we've been here, how much we paid attention. If you pay attention to your life, you'll notice that there are a lot of events that everybody here has been through. And some of them you would categorize as big events, and some you'd categorize as small events, and some significant and others insignificant. The story of Purim, over approximately a decade, was the story of Purim, 9 to 11 years or so, whatever exactly it was. But the point is, it starts even earlier than the story starts. But the storyline of approximately 10 years is a story where it looks like it's all just random events that happen, but really every event there is very significant. And if you take a look at your life, you'll notice that one thing led to another, which led to another, which led to another, that experiences we may have had 13 years ago, like, are still playing out today. Who knows, right? And these are the small things. That's why you have to hear every word. Because even a word which you think isn't significant is actually significant. And an event that happens in your life that you think is insignificant is actually significant. And that's when you look at that, the totality of that, and you start to say, wow, you mean God's involved in that too? Like even in the small area? And this is why we call this word control, meaning there's a certain level of that God's involved, and he's involved in a major way. And really, the question is whether or not we're willing to see that. And when one does see that, what that does is it opens up the ability to live a life where you could just chill. You could chill, which is really what we're looking for. We're looking to chill. I don't know the English way of saying that, but sit like this, whatever you guys do, you know what I'm saying? But in New York, we chill hard, you know what I'm saying? We hit it, right? That's what we just relax, tranquilo, todo bueno, everything's good, just do a thing. It's all right. When one can realize, as we say, let go, maybe you heard the expression, let go and let God. And let God, apologies, and let God. When a person let go and let God, we can realize the fact that God's running the show. So we put in our efforts, we do what we got to do. But we recognize the fact that God really is involved and actually is in control, and we don't have to be so nervous, and we don't have to be anxious and stressed out, and whatever it is. Just chill, take it easy, do what we got to do. Everything is going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right. All right, so let me show you a little bit of how we see that. I want to share with you how we see the fact that God's actually involved in the world in a very detailed way. So we're going to take a look and see the following. If you get dizzy, close your eyes in between the presentation. All right, so here we go. There's a very well-known idea that Nachmanides, others as well, but made very famous. Nachmanides was a great sage, lived from 1194 to 1277. And Nachmanides, the Ramban, Rav Moshe ben Nachman, says a fascinating idea. He says, we have this book that's called the Torah. And in this book called the Torah, it comes and tells us how we're supposed to be living our lives. Now, does anyone know what this is a real question. It's not rhetorical. I know maybe you're not used to this, but not rhetorical. What does the word Torah mean? What is the definition of the word Torah? Teachings, law. Say it? Good, that's what I was looking for. Especially even in modern Hebrew, if you want to learn how to drive, you get a book called Torat Nehiga, which means instructions for driving. If you want to know how to live your life, it's called Torat Chaim, instructions for life. The word Torah means instruction. It's instruction. It's an instruction manual. So if it's an instruction manual, then just tell me what I got to do. Wake up in the morning, say Moda'ani, thank you God, wash your hands, pray, make blessings, put on tefillin, give charity, and all that jazz. Right? But why is it you tell all these stories? There was a guy named Jacob, and he had a brother named Esau, Yaakov and Esau, and they got into fight. Who cares? Just tell me what I need to know. Tell me what I got to do. I go, and that's it. Why are you throwing in all the stories? What's the answer? Instructions is correct for 200. The answer is, because the greatest way to give instructions, if I may rant for a moment, which I guess no one's going to say anything, but I'm just going to rant. I find it such a loss that when kids go to school, when they're young, I'm going to imagine it's similar here. I think you call it reception. Is that, they got it right? Yeah, to me, it's like reception means I just came to some office and the doctor went, I'll see you. Like, I didn't know, like, the receptionist was 3.5. But anyway, the point is that when you go to reception, and there's a little bit, if I'm not, at least the way it works in America, it's a little more excitement when you're in reception than you are in primary school, right? When you're reaching like, am I close? Right? When you're reaching like your 3rd year, 4th year, whatever. When you're 4.5 years old and you learn about the Torah, it's like, it's hands-on, it's projects, it's discussions, kids come home excited, and then you get to like what we would call first grade, you're 6 years old, you're 7 years old, and then it's just like, in line, sit down, get your pencils, right where you got to, okay, and it's just like, and what happened to the excitement? Like, where did it go? The greatest way to teach instruction is through story. That's the greatest way. The greatest way of teaching is through story. Why? Because then you don't even realize that you're being taught. What happens is you're hearing a story, like, that's exciting, it's a nice story, but you're not even paying attention to the fact that this is actually teaching you a life lesson. So comes along the Ramban, Nachmanides, as we said, 13th century and 12th century, 1194, 1277. He comes and he tells us, you know why we have these stories? As it says over here, Ma'aseh avot siman labanim, of your more yeshivas, Ma'aseh avot siman labanim. That means that the happenings of the forefathers are a sign of what will happen to the descendants afterward. This is not for nothing. Firstly, there's a lot of lessons to be learned through the stories. And furthermore, it's also coming to tell us an idea you should just know, pay attention, because what goes on in the Torah, the stories that happen, are instructions on how to live your life. You're going to go through experiences. And hafach ba de kula ba. Ben Bagbag Omer. Ben Bagbag says, also sage found in Pirkei Avos chapter 5, I believe it's Mishnah 25, comes and says at the very end of the 5th chapter, which is actually close to the end of the actual Pirkei Avos, because there's only 5 chapters, not 6. 6 of the Brises, that's the Kenyan Torah, which is put afterwards. Point is, as it comes on Ben Bagbag, and what does he say? Turn it, the kula ba, everything's in it. Everything's in the Torah. You're in the Torah, you're in the Torah, you're in the Torah. You're also in the Torah. We're all there. Every one of us, and our whole life is in there. Story of our lives are in the Torah itself. The question is whether or not we're paying attention to it. Maisa avasim in the bottom. What happened over there is teaching us something. He gives a small example. Who's known to be the first Jew? Quick, who's known to be the first Jew? Avram is called, even though technically he wasn't really Jewish, fine, but Avram Avinu is called the first Jew. Just a little quickly, does anyone know where was Avram living? Does anyone know where he lived? Canaan is correct. Good. Does anyone know what happened when he was in Canaan? There was an event. There was a famine. You guys are catching on. You're quick. And what happened when there was a famine? Where did he go? He went to Egypt. What happened when he got there? Sarah, his wife, Sarah, gets taken. She gets oppressed. What did Sarah do? She cried out. And what did God do? He sent plagues, not frogs, but he sent plagues to Pharaoh and to the people that were there, the Egyptians. And what happened? They went and they left with great wealth. Okay, this is a storyline of Avram. Let me tell you a story about one of his grandchildren by the name of Yaakov, a.k.a. Jacob. I don't know, where did Yaakov live? Good. What happened when he lived there? And where did he go? And what happened when the Jewish people went to Egypt? They got oppressed, and what did they do? They cried out, God sent plagues, and they left with great wealth. Does that look familiar? I hope you guys caught it, right? Like, oh my goodness, it's the same. Okay, so we have Avram, Yaakov, different people. But the same storyline, says the Ramban. This is an example. What happened to the forefathers and what's going to happen? History repeats itself. But it's not history repeats itself. History repeats itself as a general concept of what occurs. This is quite specific. And what's happening here is telling us that what happened to the forefathers is what's going to happen to children afterwards. Maisa avos simul lebanim. That which happened to the forefathers, maaseh avot simul lebanim. Right, so the question is, does that play out only in such a small example? No, it actually plays out throughout I want to show you something much grander. What I'm going to attempt to do over the next 3 hours is I'd like to show you. I see you like, are you serious? Why you bring me here? What I want to try to do over the next time that we're together is I'd like to show another example that doesn't play 200 to 300 years like this one. Let's play that over a couple hundred years. I want to show you something that plays out throughout the millennia. And then I'll be able to, when we see that, we're able to see that the hand that wrote this book called the Torah, actually has control, actually has control over our lives, over the world itself. So let's take a look and see. But we have to do a little history for that. So let's go back, way back again, start off with Avram Avinu, Padre Almino, Avram Avinu, Luz de Israel, Avram Avinu. What happened with Avram Avinu? He had a couple of sons. They don't know how many sons he had. 2 is correct. Now, if you really want to get sticky, 8, because 6 later with Keturah, whoever that was, maybe Hagar, maybe not Hagar. Fine, the point is, but we know 2 main ones. He had 2 kids. What were their names? Yishmael and Yitzchak. Okay, good. Now, Yitzchak ended up having how many sons? 2 is correct, and their names are Esav and Yaakov, or Esau and Jacob. Forgive me if I go back and forth. I'm used to teaching many different types of groups, so I get stuck in both languages. Okay, so we have Esav and Yaakov. So this is what goes on. Now, what we're going to see is as follows. There were 3 battles that went on between Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau, but not just any battles, 3 epic battles. What were those battles? Well, let's talk about battle number 1. What was the first battle between Yaakov and Esav? The very first one was, who's coming out first? It was in the womb. Who's going to be born first? That would be known as the birthright. Now, excuse this, it's going to come up later. There's a mistake there, but we'll see how that follows through. What's the very first one that we have? First one is over the birthrights. Who is going to be born first is going to get the birthright. There was a guy named Abraham. Abraham had a son named Yitzchak. He passed on the blessings to Yitzchak. He had Isaac and Yishmael. He passed on to Yitzchak. And then Yitzchak's passing it on now. Who's it going to go to? To Yaakov or to Esav? To Jacob or to Esau? Well, who's going to be the firstborn? So what ends up happening is that we know that he goes ahead and they have a whole battle. What happened to the birthright? Now, whoever gets the birthright is getting the blessings. It's getting passed down. And whoever gets those blessings are primarily in the land of Israel. Now, who ended up coming out first? Right, comes out first. Really, Esav comes out first. He's the first one who comes out. And why was he called Esav? What was his name, Esav? From the word asu. What does asu mean? Asu means finished, done, cooked. He came out finished, a red hairy beast. Following him is an arm, which grabs onto his ankle, which is why we call Yaakov ankle. Because the word Yaakov means Akev, which means heel. So he grabbed onto his heel, so they call him Heel Boy, a.k.a. Yaakov. Looks like Esav won the battle, but he didn't win the war. Because what happens a couple of years later, what happens? He comes in and he sees that he's making a stew. What kind of stew? It was, I don't know, these are the wrong type of beans. But the point is, he was making a lentil stew. Why was he making a lentil stew? Because somebody had died. Who died? Who died? Avram had died. Yitzchak was mourning. And what happened was that Esav comes in from the field and he says he was so tired and he says, Haliteni na min ha'adom adoma zeh. Pour down my throat some of that red stuff. You know what we say? You are what you eat. Says the Torah in the next words, the actual narrative. Al kain kara eshemo Edom. We will now call you red. This is not even like midrashim, beforshim. The psukim say, he says, pour down my throat some of that red stuff. Says the narrative, we now call him red. Back into the story. So they call him red, and that's what happens. Esav comes in, he's starving. He says, give me that red stuff. We call him red. We call him Edom. And like we said, the reason why he was doing it is because Avram had died. Yitzchak was mourning for his father. So what did Yaakov do? He made him food. What's the type of food? He made him lentils. Why lentils? Lentils is something which is around. What do you give somebody who's a mourner? You give a mourner something like an egg or a lentil, something which is around because it's symbolic of the circle of life. Because what happens is, as life continues, then it goes in a circle and it's going to go, it starts and it finishes and it starts and it goes. So he makes them the lentil stew. He says, no problem. He goes ahead and he says, oh yeah, no problem. I'll give it to you. I'll give you the lentils. No problem. I'll say, just give me your birthright. Tell me your birthright, like today. So he says, what birthright? Well, why should I want this? Anybody here ever heard of a story called Jack and the Beanstalk? Yes or no? You heard that before? Anybody ever made a connection? Who's Jack? Yaakov. What's the beanstalk? The sale of the beans. Huh. Oh my. And you know what Little Red Riding Hood is? Nothing. Nothing at all. And you absolutely should not read that story. It is a horrible story. It teaches your kids to hate their grandmother. They're going to think that the grandmother's a fox or a wolf or whatever it is. And then they ask, what does the fox say? But really it's a wolf. Right? But the point is that they go ahead. Rav Noach Weinberg, a blessed memory, who started Eisha Torah, where I teach in the old city of Yerushalayim, he used to speak a lot to groups that were coming in. They didn't really know much about their Judaism. They'd come in and he'd say, like, do you understand the stories that were being taught? Little Red Riding Hood. You understand these stories of like Goldilocks? You guys know the story of Goldilocks? Like, so what's Goldilocks teach you? It's a beautiful lesson. Break into people's homes and sleep in the bed that's just right. What is going on? What are these lessons? You know, what is it? Okay, maybe you can learn the Rambam. He's Amtsalius. You know what I'm saying? It's like, not too hot, not too cold, just right. Yeah? Okay, the point is that he goes, sell me your birthright like today. He says, what do I care? He doesn't know the Chlomos, I'm going to die anyway. He goes in and he sells it to him. And he scorns the birthright. He's not even into it altogether. Now, what's wild about this whole thing is what happens next. What happens next? I mean, it looks like so far, like he's Esav won. He came out first. He's the eldest. He's getting the birthright. There's only one problem is that he just sold his birthright. But his father Yitzchak doesn't know about that. Yitzchak doesn't know that he sold it. So Yitzchak, he's waiting and he's calls one day his son Esav, and he says, Esav, come on over here, boy. He says, what is it, Pops? He said, I want you to go catch me some game. You know, I'll satiate my soul, and then I'll bless you. He says, all right, you got it, Pops. Someone else was there that overheard this, by the name of Rivka. That was Yitzchak's wife, Rivka. Yitzchak's wife, Rivka, knew this is a bad idea. If Esav gets this blessing, this is bad news for the Jews. So he says, Jacob, get over here. He says, what is it, Mom? He said, I want you to go get the blessings. But Mom, one problem. He goes, what is it? I'm not a hairy beast. Right? He was this red, hairy guy. And he was smooth skinned. He didn't, right? Now, first of all, how does the whole thing even make any sense? Won't Yitzchak see right away who it is? Won't Yitzchak see what? The answer is he was blind. Why was he blind? So one answer is because when he was brought on the mountain, he was going to by the Akedas Yitzchak, by the binding of Isaac on the mountain, the angels cried, the tears went into his eyes. That's one explanation. Another brilliant explanation by the Ramban is he was old. In any event, the point is he couldn't see well. It's like very simple. He was old, so he couldn't see. Right? So he goes and he says, but Mom, I'm not a hairy guy. He's going to know. He's like, don't worry. Get dressed up in goat skin, spray eau de toilette, goat, and you'll get in there. And you'll be, you know what I'm saying? You'll take the blessing. But Mom, what if he curses me? It'll be on me, son. Don't worry. It will be on me. So he says, okay. So he goes, and when Esav's out there going to catch the game, in the meantime, Rivka prepares the food, gives it to Yaakov. Yaakov brings it in, and he says, here I am, Father, bless me. And he says, who is that? Who is that? Now you have to understand, Yaakov and Esav were twins. It has to be they sounded similar, because imagine Esav, it was like, what up? And Yaakov's like, hello. It just wouldn't work. He walks in and is like, it's me, I'm here. Like, what? What are you doing? So they sounded similar. But the way they spoke was different. The mannerism. So he walks in and he says, Father, here I am. He says, who is that? And he says possibly one of the most famous lines in the entire Torah. He says, Anochi Esav b'chorecha. I am Esav, your firstborn. Any problems with that other than the fact that he's lying? Say it again. Well, you're saying that you're asking why even say that all together. The answer is we could say because, hey, no, it's me, you're firstborn, I get the blessing, I'm here for it, it makes sense. But how could it be he could lie? So Rashi famously puts a comma, so he says, Anochi, comma, Esav b'chorecha, which goes something like this. Who is that? Anochi, I am. Esav is your firstborn. Chicken. Skiing in the Alps, and the color orange. What are the random sentences? Now it makes sense. So it downgrades it from a lie to a white lie. Like, okay, more on that. Take a look at Yaakov Kamenetsky, and I'm going to say Yaakov is beautiful. Not for now. The point is, he goes in, he says, Anochi Esav b'chorecha. She says, what? Let me feel you, son. He says, all right. He comes close to him, he feels him. He's like, oh, he's pretty hairy. Oh, that must be you. All right. Mital Shemayim, Mishman in the hearts. From the dew of the heavens, from the fats of the earth, you shall be blessed. Like a beautiful screen, right? Out walks Jacob, in walks Esav. He's like, all right, Dad, here I am. I got the food. He goes, what? Me, Efo, who, where? Your brother. He said, mi hermano, my brother. He tricked me again. He goes, what do you mean again? He goes, first he took my birthright. Now he took my blessings. He goes, what do you mean he took your birthright? Well, he sold him the birthright. Gam baruch yiheh, so he shall remain blessed. Because that means if he had the birthright, that means he was supposed to get it all along. So what do we have? Battle number one between Yaakov and Esav. Birthright, blessings, land of Israel. We have J1, E0. This is so exciting for me because I usually have to explain to Americans what the word nil means. So this is great. Thank you all for being here. J1E0. Jacob won, he came on top. The first battle, birthright, blessing, land of Israel. Yaakov comes out on top. Now, Esav is not happy now. He is quite frustrated, a bit agitated. And he turns to Yaakov. He says, Yaakov, I'm going to kill you. And Yaakov says, oh yeah? Well, I completely believe you. So what does he do? He runs away. Where does he run to? Uncle Lavan. He runs away to Uncle Lavan. If anyone, never trust a person with the last name White. Unless it's you, then it's a wonderful name. You can trust that person, bli neder. But he says to him, Lavan, Uncle Lavan. He runs away. And how long is he there for? 22 years. You guys are good. 22 years. 22 years he's there. Until finally we get the next battle. And after 22 years of being there, Yaakov gets a message from the Lord Almighty, and God comes to him and he says, it's time to make your way back to the land of Israel. He says, okay. Battle number 2, as he's making his way back to the land of Israel, who does he meet up with? His brother Esav. But he's not alone. He's there with an army of 400 men. But the commentators tell us it actually wasn't 400 men. It was 400 generals that each had a platoon of 400 men, which means it's 160,000 people. And he's like, uh-oh. Now, where was he going? Land of Israel. Battle number 2, Jacob and Esau, land of Israel. He goes, meets up with him. He's like, uh-oh. So what does he do? He starts sending him gifts. Gift after gift after gift after gift after, no, not that many. Anyway, but he sends him gifts. And then what does he do? Three-pronged approach. He prepares for war. Splits up the camp. If this one gets attacked, this one will be saved. If this one gets attacked, this one will be saved. And the last thing he does, he prays. And we learn from our forefathers. This is why, what do we all do? We bribe, we pray, we split. In any event, the point is that he goes ahead and he meets up with him. And when he meets up with him, he goes ahead and he's overcome with this emotion. And instead of going to kill him, he comes and he gives him a kiss. The Medrash said he tried to bite his neck, but that's not the pasuk. The pasuk actually says, "Vayini shikeu," as we say in Français, bisou. He comes and gives him a kiss, and he says to him, "Where are you going?" He says, "No, I'm traveling." He goes, "Well, let me escort you." He goes, "No, I got all these fledglings, and I got these flocklings, I got all these kidlings, I got a lot of lings. You go on ahead, I'll catch up with you later." He says, "Okay," slips on by and makes his way into the land of Israel. Battle number 2 between Yaakov and Esav towards the land of Israel, J2 E-0. Now what happens then? Now we got to fast forward a little bit. Fast forward, we know the whole storyline like we said. If you remember, this is going to be ended by the burial. This is when he finally dies, when Jacob dies. And they're taking Jacob's body to be buried to the land of Israel. Now if you remember, there was a famine in the land, right? And where'd they go? They went down to the land of Egypt. And then finally, the whole story with Joseph and the technicolor coat. And Joseph gets taken and he's away from his father. So anyone know how many years he was away from him? 22 years, very good. That's called midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Just like Yaakov was away from his parents for 22 years, so too his son was away from him for 22 years. So he finally goes ahead, and what happens? He goes, and we know in the meantime, he ends up, I'm not sure why I jumped there, but he ends up living where Joseph becomes the viceroy of Egypt. He's the number 2 man, number 1 man, number 2 man, number 1 of the world. He's the rey del mundo. And this guy's rocking it. He's running everything over there. And then what happens finally after 22 years, they go and they meet up. And when they meet up, he's like, "Daddy, come home, stay with me." They go and they hug. It's so exciting. He cried on his shoulder. Which one? Rashi Ramad. The point is they get all excited to see each other finally. And then Yosef says to Yaakov, "You're going to live in a land called Goshen." And he lives there for how many years? 17. Now, after 17 years, I said you guys up for that. Anyway, after 17 years, one day, what happens? Yaakov calls Yosef. He says, "Yosef." He says, "What?" He says, "I'm dying." He says, "No." He says, "Yes." He says, "Okay." He said, "I want you to promise me something." He says, "What is it, Father? What is it you'd like?" He said, "When I die, I want you to bury me in the land of Israel." They're living in Egypt, Egypto, and I want to be in Am Yisrael, Chai. I want to be over there. I don't want you to send me up to Israel. I want to be living. I want you to bury me there in a place called Marat HaMachpelah or Maras HaMachpelah. That's where I want you to go ahead and bury me. So he says, "Dad, I'll do it." He says, "Swear to me." He goes, "I swear, I'll do it." And he swears to him. Vayishavalo, and he swears to him. Okay, this is pretty wild. Now, why do you want to be buried in Marat HaMachpelah? Why do you want to be buried over there? Well, let's understand why the place is called that. I'm certain that many of you have been there before. A place in Hebron, where what happens, we have people that are buried over there. The Gemara says, I don't remember where. It's either Erevin or Nedarim, I think, on Daf Nun Daled, maybe. Anyway, the Gemara tells us that why is Marat HaMachpelah called that? There's 2 different answers. Either because it was Machpelah was double, there was a cave inside of a cave, or because there were doubles that were buried there. Who's buried there? We have Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Leah, and imagine you go on a tour of Maras HaMachpelah, and the tour guide makes up whatever they make up because that's what we do as tour guides. He goes and he says, they say, "Well, welcome to the cave of the doubles. We have Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Leah, and Esav." how would that bide for us in terms of the claim of the land of Israel? Would that look good for us or not so much? He said, that's not going to look too good. So he says, make sure that you get me buried over there so no one has a claim later. If you go, if an archaeologist goes to a location, you want to figure out who lived there, you find who died there, right? You take a look at the cemeteries, you see who was there, you get to know who has a claim to the land. So he says, make sure you have me buried over there. So he says, okay, Dad, I swear I'm going to do it. Also Esav's head, right, as we're going to get to right now. So what happens? They go ahead and they meet up. The dad dies, and they take him and they're bringing him up to the land of Israel. And as they're taking him there, who do you expect to be there trying to stop them? Uncle Esav. Esav standing there, sword in hand. Now, where do you think you're going, boys?
Well, we're just going to bury Dad. Dad died, so we're going to bury him because we got to bury Dad because Dad's dead. We got to go bury him.
He's like, well, not in my land.
Oh, Uncle Esav, what are you talking about? We fight about this every bar mitzvah. You sold this to Dad fair and square. Like, this is his land. Like, you sold it. He goes, oh, yeah? Show me the contract. Show me the deed. They're like, well, I mean, of course, because we carry it with us to funeral processions. We don't have it. He said, I ain't letting in on this land until you show me that deed. It's like, okay, what can we do? One of the sons by the name of Naphtali, who was known to be quite fast, turns around and starts running back to the land of Israel. But there was someone else that was standing over there. And that was someone by the name of Hushim ben Dun. We know Yaakov had 12 sons. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Yosef, Binyamin, 12 Shevatim. 12 sons. One of them was Dun. Dun had a son by the name of Hushim. Anyone know why he was called Hushim? Tell me something about Hushim. Tell me. I can't hear you. Right? Hushim was deaf, no escucho. Right? Hushim couldn't hear. That's why it's called Hushim, right? Because the word Hushim means? Yeah, it doesn't really work, does it? Right? The word Hushim means senses, as in the 5 senses. He was lacking one of them, as what we call Lashon Sagi Nahar. We speak of like someone who's blind, we call in Talmudic terminology, full of light. It's a euphemism, way of speaking that should be negative. Called senses. He was deaf. He doesn't know what's going on. He's the grandson. He never saw Esav. He didn't have Facebook. All he knows is that there's this red hairy beast there, standing in the way of his grandfather, who's frying in the Middle Eastern sun. And he's like, enough for this, takes out his staff, the Gemara in Sota, Daf Yud Aleph, goes ahead and knocks off his head, or hits him in the head. His head up rolling into Arafela. And battle number 3 between Yaakov and Esav. By the burial, we have J3 Enil. Thank you all for coming. Now, the question is, if like the Ramban said, that which happens to the forefathers is a sign of what's going to happen to the children, where do we find that maybe that plays itself out throughout history? And then maybe we'll be able to clearly see that the hand that wrote this book called the Torah, similar to like we spoke about Megillah Esther, goes ahead and there's control over here. God's involved. God's got it. It's okay. You can just chill. Where do we get this? Where do we find? Let's take a look and see. Not just with Yaakov and Esav, but 3 battles. Not just any battles, 3 epic battles. Between the descendants of Yaakov and the descendants of Esav. Namely, the Edomites and the Israelites, the descendants. 3 battles going into the land of Israel. Every time the Jewish people coming out victorious. Let's take a look. Does anyone know when was the first time the Jewish people as a nation make their way towards the land of Israel? When was that? After what? After Mitzrayim, after Egypt. After Egypt, they make their way to the land of Israel. Did anyone come along and try to attack them and stop them? Anyone at all? Good. Someone by the name of Amalek, or if you prefer Amalek, or if you really prefer Amalek. Anyway, Amalek, if you this fighting version. Right? He goes in and says, goes and tries to stop them, tries to go into the land of Israel. Anybody know who won that battle? That would be J1 Enil. The only question is Amalek a descendant of Esav? Because if not, it doesn't really work. So let's take a look if that's the case. Right? So you take a look and you'll see there's a guy by the name of Esav. Esav had a son by the name of Eliphaz. Eliphaz had a son by the name of Amalek. Not only they're related, he was his grandson. Now, he's actually more than just his grandson. There's a little I'm my own grandpa stuff going on there for those who are familiar with that song. But the point is that a lot of bad stuff going on. He very much, so we have the first battle between the descendants of Yaakov and the descendants of Esav making their way to the land of Israel. Comes out J1 Enel. When's the next time the Jewish people as a nation make their way towards the land of Israel? Well, you may ask me, what do you mean the next time? They were there. The answer is they were exiled for a predicted 70 years. Until they're going to come and make their way back. Did anyone come along at that point and try to kill and destroy all the Jewish people? Anoshim, Noshim, Vitaf. Who was that? Someone by the name of Haman. Boo! Very good. And they're making their way back at the end of 70-year exile. They're making their way back to the land of Israel. And as they're going, who do you expect to attack? Well, the descendants of Esav. Who's that Haman? Israel, J2, Enil. The only question is Haman, boo, a descendant of Amalek? Well, let's take a look. If you take a look over here, the scroll of Esther, which we just read 2 days ago here, 3 days ago, I don't know, 7 days ago. Read the scroll of Esther, it's a long time ago. King Achashverosh promoted Haman, boo, the son of Hamdasa, the Agagite. Now, what in the world is an Agagite? Mom, he called me an Agagite. What's an Agagite? Well, let's take a look at the book of Samuel, 1:15-32. Samuel said, bring to me Agag, the king of Amalek. What's an Agagite? Agag is the king of Amalek. Haman is a descendant of Agag. Boo. Agag is Amalek. Amalek is the grandson of Esav. Indeed, we have that he is very much related. Battle number 2, Jacob and Esau, J2, Enel. Well, when's the next time the Jewish people as a nation make their way to the land of Israel? Well, you may ask me, what do you mean the next time? I thought they were there. They were exiled for almost 2,000 years. The Jews have been traveling the diaspora. Join us to see when we come back. When's the next time the Jewish people as a nation start the process of coming back to the land of Israel? Anyone know? Well, that's one answer, and I love the unity. This is beautiful. It's like, what you've done here, Rabbi, is just impeccable. I'm going to share with you another answer, though, although that was good. That was good. There's another answer, and I'm assuming that we're going to go a lemafreya shtika koda, and that's the following. That is, at the end of the 1700s, there was an attempt by the students of the Vilna Gaon to come to the land of Israel. It failed miserably until the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, with the students of the Chassam Sofer, which is known as the first waves of Aliyah. That was the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. Was there anyone who came around the beginning of the 1900s that wanted to kill every man, woman, and child in the Jewish nation? Someone by the name of Yamach Shemo V'Zichro. There's the 3, by the way, if you're wondering. There it is. It comes up a little late. Anyway, someone by the name of Hitler, Yamach Shemo V'Zichro, and the Nazis come along and try to kill every man, woman, and child in the Jewish nation. Anyone know when Hitler Yamach Shemo was born? When? He was born on April 1889. April 20th, some know that as 420, Hamivin Yavin. April 20th, if you don't know what that is, it's Baruch Hashem, and if you do, you tshuva. April 20th, 1889, the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s, and you think it was only 1939? It started much earlier than that. Just 1939 is when he started really wreaking serious, practical, seeing damage, but we're talking about 1920s already. He was getting involved, early 30s of what was happening over here. The Nazis, as we're going towards the land of Israel, anybody know who won that battle? Now, unfortunately, we took a big hit there. But this is what we call at least a TKO, if not a KO. What was the goal of Yamach Shemo V'Zichro? The final solution, kill every man, woman, child, and all Jewish people, everyone. He did unfortunately, a relatively good job. Never killing so many Jews died in the Holocaust. But he certainly didn't succeed in what his plan was, coming out with, as we are here today, J3, Enel. I was just talking with a student of mine, I don't know what day it is anymore. I'm a little confused with days. But on Tuesday, what's today? Yesterday, I was talking with with a student of mine. His name is Kalmi. I was talking with him yesterday, and he has a daughter. And when his daughter was born, he brought his daughter to his, I think it was his wife's grandmother
who survived, who's a survivor of the Holocaust. And she took the baby, and she held the baby, and she looked at the baby, and the first thing she said is, this is my revenge to Hitler, Yamach Shema. Jewish babies, a revenge to Hitler. Forever burned in our minds. This is okay, so we see over here 3 battles, Yaakov and Esav, going to the land of Israel. Myself a similar bottom. God runs the show. He's going to make it happen again. It's going to happen again. And we're going to see we're going to come out victorious. 3 battles of the descendants of Yaakov and Israel. All of them coming out victorious. The only question is, are the Nazis descendants of Amalek? If they are, then we've just closed up shop. We're good. And if they're not, my flight is leaving soon, so I'll run. So let's take a look and see. So we're going to look at 2 different angles here. Number one, we're going to looking from something known as the Talmud, aka the Gemara. Now, once again, I don't know your backgrounds, and I'm not judging. I'll tell you, I've been teaching for a while, and when I first started teaching, I would teach in Eish HaTorah in the Old City. So it's a place where, at least then when I first started, people that not really connected to their Judaism would come in, and I would look at someone, and on the outside I'd look at someone, and I would judge them. Don't pretend like you don't, okay? I would judge them. And I would see people that look like they're totally secular, and I think they're secular, and then they'd open their mouth, and I'd be right, they're secular. But there are others that would open their mouth, and I was totally off the mark. Like, I thought they were not connected at all. I remember this one guy, very holy guy, lots of piercings. And this guy, he was sitting there quietly. I didn't know the guy was Jewish, let alone if he was religious. And I said the whole thing, and he goes, yeah, well, what about the Rambam? I was like, looking at him, and I'm thinking, like, did that just come out of it? My brain was going, error. I didn't hear what he just said. He said the Rambam. I'm like, the who? He goes, the Rambam, Maimonides. I was like, huh? And it hit me really hard. I realized that just because somebody looks like they're secular doesn't mean that they're secular. And just because someone looks like they're religious. Anyway, moving along. So there's something known as the Talmud, as the Gemara. And the Gemara, this is written down. It's important to understand that the Gemara is a commentary on the Mishnah. The Mishnah was part of the oral tradition. And it was never meant to be written, but it had to be written eventually, because even though it was meant to be oral, what happened was that all the nations of the world loved us to death. And had we not written it down, it would have been forgotten. We were being exiled throughout all by the second. When we come back after 70 years, and they're 420, we're going to get kicked out. We're going to get kicked all over the world. We always got to write this down. It's going to be forgotten. So we wrote down the Mishnah. And after that, it had to be written longer. So it's known as the Gemara. The Gemara is the longhand, essentially, of the Mishnah. Elaborates, elucidates, makes clear what exactly the Mishnah is saying. 36 different tractates, books of the Babylonian Talmud. It's Talmud Bavli. And written down approximately 1,600 years ago. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the Talmud, the Gemara. We're going to look at that little thing on the bottom, which we call a Gragar. Okay, that would be the story again, the story of Purim. Let's start off with the Gemara. The Gemara says a fascinating thing. It's found in the Gemara in Megillah on Daf Vav Amud Beis 6b. And I know what you guys are thinking. It's really Vav Amud Aleph on the bottom line, and it turns the page. You're right. We didn't want to write both pages. Okay, so the Gemara says the following. Rav Yitzchak said, what is meant by the verse in Psalms, if you don't know how to read, and Psalms if you do? 149. Oh God, don't grant the desires of the evil man, and don't let him draw out his bit, lest he raise himself above others. First of all, what is a bit? What does that mean? Good, the thing that you put in the horse's mouth in order to have control. It's not the reins, then you attach the reins to a bit, they bite on. Now really, if you look in the Gemara, it doesn't say the word bit, it says another word, but it's going to get confusing, so we use this easier to understand. And don't let him draw out his bit, what does it mean when it says in the Talmud, don't grant the desires of the evil man, don't let him draw out his bit, lest he raise himself above others. Says the Talmud, explaining this idea, it says the following. Jacob, our forefather, said to God, don't grant the desires of the evil man. This refers to Esav. And don't let him draw out his bit. This refers to Germania of Edom. For should they go forth, they would destroy the entire world. Does Germania sound familiar to anyone? A little like France? Good. A little like Germany, maybe? Germania. As a matter of fact, in actual, if you want to say Germany, it would be Germania. It's Germania. It's one letter that they're pronouncing differently. And on the side of the page, it's written immediately. The commentaries say, Zuhi Germania, this is Germany. And that commentary is written almost 300 years ago when it says that. Okay, interesting. So what we see is, don't grant the desires of the evil man, don't let him draw at his bit. What do you mean draw at his bit? What's the thing that's controlling him and holding him back? That's the thing, don't let him do, because he could destroy the whole world. And that's what it means. It says, don't let him draw at his bit. It's talking about Germania of Edom. We're talking about Esav and Germania of Edom. Should they go forth and destroy the entire world? Does Edom sound familiar to anyone? Remember who Edom was? Let's just get a little flashback. Esav is Edom. Interesting. Germania, Germany of Edom. The Gemara is linking Germany back to Edom. Should they go forth? So how do you stop them? How do you stop them from taking over? Says the Gemara. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina said, there are 300 crown princes in Germania of Edom and 365 chieftains in Rome. And every day one goes out to meet the other and one of them is killed and they all have the trouble of appointing a king again. 300 crown princes in Germania of Edom, 365 chieftains in Rome. Take a look at this. The rise and fall of the Third Reich. By the end of the Middle Ages, which had seen Britain and France emerge as unified nations, Germany remained a crazy patchwork of some 300 individual states. 300 crowned princes in Germania of Edom, 365 chieftains in Rome. Is there anything strange about the Talmud mentioning Germany? You guys are not Americans. Come on, you're supposed to know history. What's interesting about it? When was the Talmud written? Germany didn't exist till 300 years later with Charlemagne, Charles the Great, who established the Holy Roman Empire, which historians tell us was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But the point is, nonetheless, is that they go and they say 300 crown princes and 300, now happens to be, they were known as city-states. That was the way that it was set up. But understand that that inherently means it was separate. It was separate from one another. Which means to say, what do we see? We see two things. Number one, there's disunity. 300 crown princes in Germania of Edom. There's not one prince, one king. Everyone has their individual things, disunity. And every day one goes out to meet the chieftains in Rome, keep them fighting with Rome. If you keep Germany disunited and you keep them fighting with Rome, then we're cool. Then the bit's in place, we're good. What happens if you get rid of the disunity? In other words, what happens if Germany were to unify with itself as well as with Rome? Should they go forth, they could destroy the entire world. Was there ever a time in history when Germany unified with itself as well as with Rome? That would be with a guy by the name of Benito Mussolini, and that would be called World War II. And what happens is, when they go ahead and they start doing, should they go forth, they could destroy the entire world. And my friends, we see how scary that is. So from the Talmud, we get to see a link that the Nazis indeed are descendants of Amalek, even if it's not blood, it's not a point of blood, a mentality of how a person's linking back to a certain way of living. Should they go for it? Tzaddik HaKohen spells it out beautifully. A great sage, 1823, 1900, comes and he says about the different criteria of what it means to be Amalek, anti-God, anti-Israel, and what happens, how they go ahead and what they tried to do. And Hitler was sending people, they're sending troops to Israel on the way to go ahead and to start concentration. They started building concentration camps in Israel. Everyone know that? Started building concentration camps. It's unbelievable stuff going on that they started building. They sent to the Suez Canal when they were getting demolished on the other front, because the goal was to go against this. The point, nonetheless, is we see Germania of Edom. Now, that's from number one, just to show this. We have one more point from this I want to share with you. But before that, I want to just share what we call the icing on top. Why would it be that Hitler would make a treaty with Mussolini? Now, there's a reason, right? They're both fascists and they have the water. It makes sense. It makes sense into logistics. But if you take a look from another point, you know that Hitler, Yamach Shemo, broke every treaty he made with everyone except for Mussolini, which eventually he also broke. But one of the most important treaties were made was known as the tripartite between himself, Italy, and Japan. And that's the one. But if you think about it militarily, what did Germany have versus what did the Italians have? Germany had blitzkrieg. They created lightning war. They had ballistic missiles. The ballistic or whatever, they had missiles. They had submarines. They were rocking it. What did the Italians have? horses and fettuccine. The Italians lost every battle they ever fought, except for one. They beat the Ethiopians, and the Ethiopians did not have any guns. So the fact that the Talmud is mentioning to us, Germania of Edom, should they go forth and destroy the entire world, the very thing you need to do to keep them is disunity and not with Rome. Those are the things that they put in place, and linking it back to the idea that we see that indeed, that this is a descendant of. But now it brings us to the last part, and that's the story of Purim itself, which we just celebrated. And I happen to be a very big fan of speaking about holidays, not on the holiday. Because everybody speaks about the holiday on the holiday. And then we forget about it. It's like, we do Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you think about change. Talk about 6 months later. No. I don't want to talk about it 6 months later. Let's talk about it then, get it over with. We can do our Averas and we'll talk about it later, right? He says, no, let's talk about it later. I was in Baltimore maybe 2 months ago, and no less, a month and a half ago. And I got up and I said, I think this is the right time to talk about Hanukkah. And absolutely nothing to do with Hanukkah. But let's talk about Hanukkah. Let's talk about Purim. Purim's over. Let's discuss something. Some of you might be somewhat familiar. You should know the story a little bit. And let's take a look and see. What I'm showing you right now, for certainly any observant Jew, this is probably the most famous picture ever. You show this to a Jew, and immediately they're going to know that this is the first page of Sefer Bereshis. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong page. Immediately they're going to know that this is a page from Megillas Esther, from the scroll of Esther. Which page is it, dare I ask? I don't need the number. I mean, what is it? Oh, it's close to the end. Who is it? What's this talking about? Right, the 10 sons of Haman, boo. And this is a very, very famous page. I want to bring it closer so you can see it better. Okay, now, let's read it. So it might be a little hard for the Hebrew, so we're going to do a little bit of English for you. Here we go. Now listen carefully. I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. It's going to sound like a silly question, because it is, but I want you to play along anyway. I'm going to ask it. It's going to sound silly. I'm asking all of you to answer my silly question. And the Jews struck it. Oh, I got to take one step back. There's a guy named Achashverosh. He was the king. There was someone named Haman. He wanted to kill all the Jews. And they made a whole plan. There was a queen, Queen Esther, who was Jewish, but they didn't know she was Jewish. In this part of the story, they did know she's Jewish. And then she stands up over there. And this is the discussion that's going on after Esther reveals who she is. And there's a whole craziness, and they end up killing people, and it gets wild. Here we go. And the Jews struck at all their enemies with the sword. What'd they do it with? The sword. What'd they do it with? What'd they do it with? The sword. And the Jews struck at all enemies with the sword. And with slaughter and destruction, and did as they pleased to those who hated them. Using what? The sword. You guys are good. And in Shushan, the capital, the Jews slew and destroyed, using what? The sword. 500 men, including 10 sons of Haman, son of Haman, so it goes ahead and kills these 10 people, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not lay their hands on the spoils. How are the 10 sons of Haman killed? I love religious audiences in particular. So what do we just read? I'm a little slow. I'm from New York, but what did we just read? And the Jews struck all the enemies with the sword. Skip that end. And Shushan, the capital, Jews slew and destroyed 500 men, including with what? Thing. I'm pretty sure that it says right here, black on white, or maybe you see it black and yellowish, that it says with the sword. But what's amazing is that if somebody grew up in a religious home, we have all fallen prey to being brainwashed, educated, in a particular manner, but this time it's actually brainwashed incorrectly by certain pictures, which are accurate when they're right, B'ito B'zmano. How were they killed? They were killed by the sword. So why did you say they were hanged
because that's what you learned. Why'd you learn that? Well, let's keep going. That same day, the number of those killed in Shushan, the capital, was reported to the king. What's his name? Ahasuerus. The king said to Queen Esther, in Shushan, the capital, the Jews have slain and destroyed with what? The sword. 500 men, including the 10 sons of Hamanbu. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? What is your request now? It shall be granted to you. What is your petition further? It shall be fulfilled. What is going on here? You just like a picture of the thing. He goes on and he says, Esther, I can't believe what's going on here. This is crazy. They just killed like 500 people. This is out of control. What would you like now, dear? Whatever you like. Whatever you want, it's yours. What do you want? I'll give it to you. If you'd be Esther, what would you respond? The king of the world says, ¿Qué tú quieres? ¿Qué tú quieres? What do you want? You say, yo quiero Taco Bell. He says, no kasher. What do you want? What would Queen Esther, what would you say? You're there, what would you say? Come on. What's that? Let's rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Let us rebuild our temple. It had started earlier, previous. He had stopped it. Right? Koresh, his father, his stepfather, whatever, his father, let's hold discussion who he was exactly. His grandfather, his father, the same person fight first, the second, the third. Right? There wasn't a third, but there were two. Maybe there's a third later. But he goes and says, like, let's rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. At least ask for a pair of shoes. Something. What does she say? Esther replied, if it pleases the king. Who's that? Ahasuerus. Allow the Jews of Shushan to do tomorrow as they've done today, and let Hamanbu's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. The king ordered that this be done. Your Majesty, it is my request. Can we please hang 10 dead people? He's like, okay, we thought you were a little off. Sure, we can do that. Yeah.
But it says they've already killed.
Yeah, they're dead. With the sword.
And then how?
That's right. That's right. Which is the strength. Which is like, what? What? Why would you do that? I need to do another one there. Well, how and where? Question mark. Why would you ask for such a thing? It's strange. So one answer, Rashi of Shlomo Yitzchaki, the famous middle commentator from France, 1040-1105, and a nice dessert wine, if you like that kind of thing. Comes and asks, he answers, well, it's to send a message. You don't mess with the Jewish people. We kill you, and then we hang you. What's up now? You are. Anyway, point is, that's one answer. Another answer is as follows, and this is a wild, we have to understand a little bit to get this. There's something quite unique. Does anybody know how many books there are, what we call part of the written Torah? How many books of Tanakh are there? How many? I'll give you multiple choice. Is it A, 24, B, or C? Good, A is correct. There are 24 books of Tanakh. And in the 24 books of Tanakh, the Lord's name is mentioned all over the place. Elokim, Yudke, Vavke, Shakai, Kel. God's name is everywhere. There's one book, possibly known also, I was going to choose whatever that means. There's one book where the Lord's name is not mentioned even one time. Where's that? Megillah Esther. In Megillah Esther, God's name is not mentioned anywhere explicitly. Now the question is, why is that? Why is it not mentioned anywhere explicitly, which we're going to get back to in a minute, that it is alluded to, but not mentioned explicitly. Why? So we have to understand time period, what was going on. There was a time when there was open miracles going on in the temple, where there was prophecy galore happening, where we saw God. But then unfortunately what was happening is that we weren't doing what God wanted us to do. And God says, Anochi aser haser es panai, I'm hiding myself from you. I'm hiding myself. But then how do we know you still exist, God? How do we know you're here if you're hidden? Oh, you still have prophecy. We have prophecy. So since it's prophecy, we can know this God even though we can't see him. And then it goes further to a point when we're moving further away. God says, now you're going to lose prophecy, but because you've learned the lesson that I'm still here, even though you don't see me, you'll know that I'm still here, even though we don't have prophecy anymore. Esther is the book that canonized, that closed off, to finish the last one of Tanakh, even though it's not true in terms of timing, but it is true in terms of being the way the book, the 24 books are set up. It's the last of the 24 of Tanakh, so it's closed off to come and teach that even though I'm not here, you'll know that I'm here. We have to have a book in there that doesn't have God's name, so you should know that God's still there, even though you don't see. And that's again why Purim is the story to see. It looks very mundane. It looks like God's not there, but no, not true. You missed the boat. God's there. Every letter, every word, every small and significant thing is significant. So although it's true that God's name is not mentioned anywhere explicitly, it is alluded to. Whenever it says the word melech in the Megillah, which means king, it's referencing the king of the time. His name was Achashverosh. Whenever it says the word HaMelech, which means the king, it's referring to who? The King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. Hallelujah, the Lord Almighty, God. Interessant. So let's look otra vez. One more time at the last paragraph. Esther replied. Very last paragraph. Esther replied. Last paragraph. Esther replied. If it pleases the king. If it pleases what? Who? The king. Who's Esther? Esther is a prophetess. Who's the king? Hashem. Who is Esther talking to? She was talking to God, even though she's right in front of it, the double entendre. It's talking to the king of the time, Achashverosh, but as she's looking at Achashverosh, she's really talking to God. She says, if it pleases the king, allow the Jews of Shushan to do tomorrow. What does tomorrow mean in the language of prophecy? In the future, as they've done today, and let Hamanbu's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. Strange that would be requested. They're already dead. Well, maybe it's talking about a different event, maybe an event in the future. The king ordered that this be done. Let's fast forward a little bit. October 16th, 1946, Goering ends life by poison. 10 others hanged in Nuremberg prison for Nazi war crimes. Doomed men on gallows pray for Germany. If it pleases the king, allow the Jews of Shushan to do tomorrow as they have done today, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. Why would you request that, Esther? The answer is Esther wasn't talking about then. Esther was talking about a future event that's going to happen. And that event fell out on October 16th, 1946. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, this is known as the Nuremberg trials. These were trials in a place called Nuremberg. Very good. These were Nazi war crimes. And what happened to Nazi war crimes? This, if anything is messed up about the Holocaust, this is probably top 10 of what's messed up. How many people got convicted at Nuremberg trials? They put like 50 on trial, 11 get convicted, 1 commits suicide, the other 10 are hanged. Now that by itself is strange, actually, historically and locationally. Yeah? Yeah, we're going to see. We're going to get into that. But this over here, that's going to come up. But one of the things that we find over here, what's really strange, is the fact that only 10, only 11? How many Nazis were involved over here? And why were they hanged? They should have been either firing squad or electric chair. That would have been normal for the location and the timing. Being hanged, the whole thing's strange. Now, what was October 16, 1946? October 16, 1946 happened to follow the following year. The year was 1946. It was the year Tuf Shin Zayin. Tuf Shin Zayin. Now, we know that we have a numbering system, which I'm going to come to in just a moment. Tuf Shin Zayin. Now, they actually were not supposed to be killed on October 16, 1946. They were supposed to be killed in June. But they did something, a little fancy word, they pled amnesty, which basically means, listen, we're really sorry. We won't do it again. You know what's messed up? That they even considered it, that they didn't kill them in June. They only killed them when? In October. Now, they didn't succeed in getting off the hook, but they did succeed in one thing, pushing off their death date till October. Now, what's October? What fell out on October 16th? 1946, happened to be a holiday called Hoshana Rabbah. What's Hoshana Rabbah? Says the Zohar. On the 7th day of the Sukkot holiday, i.e. Hoshana Rabbah, the judgment of the nations of the world is finalized. Sentences are issued from the residence of the king. Judgments are aroused and executed on that day. Coincidentally, The day that they were pushed off to be killed ended up to be Judgment Day for the nations of the world. You know what the word coincidence means? One of God's names is a yud and a hey, which we generally don't pronounce unless we're saying God's name. We call it ka. What's coincide? It means ka, inside. God's inside. No such thing as coincidence. It means happenstance. Coincide. It coincides. Because ka is inside. God's there. You think it's random? There's nothing random. There's nothing random. My brother's a little random. Truth is, my brother's not random at all. I'm the random brother. But the point is that, but he's not here to defend himself, so it's my chance to take a shot. He's 2 years older. He's always beating me up. All right, so anyway, you hear that, Eliyav? Okay? You sent him this recording. Okay, so we see like this. Coincidentally. Now, what's a little interesting besides that is the fact that the year Tufshin Zion. What's Tufshin Zayin? Now, when we wrote this presentation, it was in Tufshin Ayin Gimel. So that's why I'm giving you this one. It's a couple of years ago. We're now in Tufshin Pei Daled. But that would be 11 years ago. Truth is, when this presentation was 40 years old. But when we actually put it on Prezi, it was 11 years ago. So we're going to pretend for a moment that it's the year Tufshin Ayin Gimel. It's a little strange. There's all different numbering systems. Why is it that we have this thing that we go by these Hebrew letters? What is this Hebrew letter? Just say we're in the year 2024. Like what are we saying? This Tufshin Pei Daled, Tufshin Ayin Gimel, Tufshin Zayin. What's that all about? Well, the answer is that everybody has their own numbering systems, right? The numbering system that many of you are familiar with, like when you see a 1 and then a 2 and a 3 and a 4. What are those called? I don't know the origin of those. Something numerals, not Roman, something numerals. It rhymes with Arabic. Arabic, good. Those are called, the number system that we use today, that generally the whole world uses, is the Arabic numeral system, which is strange because really the whole world uses it except for Arabs. But that's not true. That's only Middle Eastern Arabs. If you go to Israel and you take a look at the side of Arab cabs, you'll notice the numbers are different. But that's because it's Middle Eastern Arabic. It's different than pretty much the rest of the world. Most Arabs that come to the Middle East don't even understand the Arabs of Middle Eastern Arabic. It's a different dialect. In any event, we have our own numbering system, which is called gematria, the numerical value of letters, which the reason why we go by that numbering system is because the Arabic numbering system didn't exist till many years later. We had gematria was the starting of the first system that went on. That's the numerical value of letters. Every letter has a value. Aleph is 1, Beis is 2, Gimel, so you have 1s and then 10s. You have here 1s and then 10s and then hundreds. That's the way that it works. So if you take a look at the year when we wrote the presentation, which is 5773, you have a Tuf, Shin, Ayin, Gimel, which comes out, you put that all together, it comes out to 400, 373, which equals 773, which was the year at the time, 5773. Clear? What's the problem? Yeah, what's the issue? Oh, well, the numbering system's a little not so clear, right? You have to know this system. But if you add the letters together, it comes out to 773, and that year that we wrote this out is 5773, and that should work nicely. Is that good?
Yes.
No questions. Okay, so now, thank you for asking that. We're going to come back to that. I'm so happy you said that. Because, I talk to groups all the time. I said to them, yeah, 770. They're like, oh, sure. I'm like, can I sell you a bridge while we're doing this? Like, what do you mean? I'm 5,000 off, right? Okay, so people add the hay, but it doesn't even make any sense. Because if you add the hay, then it's 5. It would be 778. Fine, but we'll explain what this means in just a moment. Let's come to that. Good question. So now let's take a look a little bit more. We're going to take a look, and this is where things get a little bit crazy. If you take a look over here, what do we say? If it pleases the king, allow the Jews of Shushan to do tomorrow as they've done today, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. The king ordered that this be done. We're going to take a look now at these are on the right side. Even if you don't read a word of Hebrew, do you see this thing going over here? Hold on. I don't know if you can see it. See my arrow thing, cursor thing? Yes. Right? So if you look on the top right corner of their screens, you'll notice going down the bold letters, those are the 10 sons of the names of Haman. Although he had a lot more kids, but fine. Point is 10 sons of Haman. We're going to play a game, and even if you don't speak any Hebrew, This game is called Which of These Things is Not Like the Other? None of it made it to England, but as a kid I was tortured with Sesame Street. And this is one of these games. Today was brought by the yellow color yellow. Anyway, so we're going to take a look at the names of the sons of Haman. How many of you see any letters that are not like the others? In other words, which are unusually different. Let's take a look at the first name. In the very first name it says Parshandas. Does anyone notice a small letter? You should notice the letter Suf or Tough. The very second to last letter, small letter. Okay, Vanna, let's put that up on the board. Na, 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 na. Let's look again. Take a look at the names and tell me if you notice another small letter. I'll skip you down. Take a look right over here at this word over here. Parmashta. Do you notice any small letters over there? The letter Shin. Let's put that up on the board as well. Shin. And last but not least, quite literally, last, we have the letter Zion. Put that up on the board, which happens to, incidentally, fall out to be the year Tufshin Zion. Not only is it that Esther predicts what's going to happen in the future, but if you open up any Megillah today, I'm sure you read the Megillah, but you take a look, you'll notice, you'll see, there's a small Tuf, a small Shin, and a small Zion. Now what's fascinating is I have a book at home called Sefer HaKatan VeHaGadol. These aren't the only places that there's big and small letters. There's also big letters coming up and small letters. But when I looked on the page that deals with these letters, on other places it tells you why it's big, why it's small, what's going on. On these letters, I didn't see an explanation as to why it was like this beforehand. So what's going on over here? We have small letters, Tuf Shin Zayin. If it pleases the king, allow the Jews of Shushan to do tomorrow as they've done today, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. Hidden within the 10 names of the sons of Haman, there's a date. The date is Tuf Shin Zayin, which happens to fall out to the year 5707, which happens to be 1946, which happens to be the Nuremberg trials, where happened to be one killed himself, the other 10 were hanged on the gallows. But wait, there's more. See, we have a little bit of a problem, and that's what was asked. Tuf Shin Zayin doesn't mean 5707, which is 1946. Tuf Shin Zayin just means 707. So how do we know it means 5707? I mean, how many times have we had the number system 707 from the first time 707 up until and including 5707? How many times? This always gets confusing. The answer is 6. I'll write it out for you. 707. No, everyone skips that one. 1707, 27, 37, 47, 57. The sixth time that you have the number system 707 is going to be 5707. So far, so good? Everybody get what's going on over here? Well, let's take a look and see how this works. Now, it's also important to note something based off the question. Why is it that we write Tuf Shin Zayin and we don't write 5707? The answer is, what's the biggest letter in the alphabet? It's a Tuf, which is how much? 400. Imagine you move to Israel, or even do it in London. You decide to change, the way you look at the calendar. I'm not going to go by the Gregorian calendar anymore. I'm not going to go by the Jewish calendar. And someone says, you're moving. When did you move here? And you say, no, I've been here since. You see, to get to the year 5000, you'd need 12 and a half of them. So what we do is you write the core, Tuf Shin Zayin, and we assume you know what millennia you live in. Good? But that's good in general, but not in specific when we're looking for something specific. So how do we know this Tuf Shin Zayin? It's still pretty cool. But how do we know it's 5707? Let's take a look again at the 10 names of the sons of Haman. Do you notice any letters that are unusually large? Perhaps at the end, maybe. I'm just saying. Let's say at the very end, the word Vaizos, you have a big Vav. Guess what the numerical value of Vav is? 6. You have a small Tuf Shin Zayin, which is 707. You have a big Vav to tell you it's the sixth time that you have these letters. What's that? 5707. If it pleases the king, allow the Jews of Shushan, they're doing to them tomorrow, the Jews are going to be hanged on the gallows. Hidden within our names in the Tuf Shin Zayin, small to the mouth, big Vav. And we're looking for control over here? Well, hold on 1 second, there's still a bit of question over here. There's a bit of a problem, because how many sons of Haman were there? 10. But how many were at Nuremberg? 10 others, which means that there were 11 Goering ends life by poison. 10 others are hanged, which means that we have 11. So is it 10 or is it 11? What's going on? How do we understand this? Well, let's take a look at the story of Purim. So what happened over there one day, we know that Mordechai, the tzaddik, the great and holy sage, was walking along and he hears that there's a plan to go to kill the king, to kill Achashverosh. He overhears this conversation with two guys, one by the name of Bigsan, another of Saras. He knows the languages that they're speaking. He tells the king, he saves the king's life. What did they do for him? Nothing is correct. They didn't do anything, but they wrote his name down in the book of the Chronicles. Divrei Hayamim. They wrote it down. You saved the king's life. Fast forward a couple years later. What happened? He wasn't able to sleep. So he wasn't able to sleep. What do we do? NyQuil. What did he do? Get me the book of the Chronicles. So they start reading in the book of the Chronicles, and they say, Mordechai the Jew saved your life. He goes, he saved my life. What did we do for him? We didn't do anything. We didn't do anything for him. We had to do something for him. Just then, in walks Esav. Just kidding, that'd be crazy. In walks Hamanbu. And he walks in and he goes, oh, Hamanbu. He's like, stop doing that. All the kids do that at school. But he says to him, Hamanbu, what should be done to the one who the king wants to greatly honor? He goes, well, he's probably talking about me. You should let him ride on the royal horse of the king. And let him wear the royal garments of the king. And get another one of your advisors, hopefully Mordechai the Jew, to pull him through town yelling, for those who don't speak Hebrew, and I just said, I'll translate. So is done to the one who the king wants to greatly honor. He said, that's a great idea, Hamanbu. Go do that to Mordechai the Jew. And he was like, oh no. I switched the language, it gets a little graphic. He said, oh no. And he said, well, actually, the Gemara tells a story. He says, no, don't do that. I mean, why don't you just name a town after him? He's like, good idea, do that also. He's like, no, he's like, yeah, do that too. He's like, I'm going to keep quiet. So Hamanbu, who hated Mordechai, he goes ahead and he says to him, you're riding on the horse, the royal horse. He gets him dressed in the royal garments of the king. He's parading him through town, yelling, and he's going through the town. This is what's done to the one who the king wants to greatly honor. As they're on their parade and they're walking by Hamanbu's house. Hamanbu had 10 sons, but he also had a daughter. He had a daughter. His daughter is on the top floor in the balcony, overlooking this parade. She goes, that must be Dad on the horse. And that must be the lowly Mordechai, the Jew, is pulling the horse. So she takes the chamber pot. For those who are unfamiliar with what the chamber pot is, I believe you call it the loo. In France, they call it la toilette. In España, they call it el baño. There's something cooking up in there. She picks it up, pours it on the head of who she thought was Mordechai. Turns out to be Dad. He looks up and goes, what the? And she's like, oh, Dad. She throws herself to her death, committing suicide. 10 are hanged. 10 are hanged. One commits suicide. One commits suicide. Anybody know how Goering killed himself? Killed himself with cyanide. You know where he hid the cyanide? But you can't hide it there, you die. He hid it in the toilet until it came time, in the chamber pot. It may have been clean, I'm not sure. But the point is, that's where he hid it until he finally went in and killed himself. Okay, but I know what you're thinking. Still, you're thinking like, okay, Shkaya, that was a great idea, but that's a man, this is a woman, that's the daughter, that's the thing. The answer to that is Mrs. Doubtfire. And for those who are unfamiliar with Mrs. Doubtfire, that would be Hermann Goering was a cross-dresser. And I didn't see this, I saw this actually on the Discovery Channel. It wasn't only about his underwear, but that was part of the thing. He would wear women's clothing underneath his uniform. 10 and 10, 11 and 11, and we were looking for control. If it pleases the king, let the Jews of Shushan do tomorrow as they've done today, and let the 10 sons of Hamanbu be hanged on the gallows. And what happens, hidden within the 10 names, we got a small, tough, Shin and Zayin. And then we got a big Vav, which has a tough Shin and Zayin. And we got 10 and 10, we got 11 and 11, and different ways of expressing that. And we're looking for control, but if only it would be like, what would really be like the best to end this off would be like, imagine like at the trials themselves, they would just say it, like, you got us. This is a story of Purim all over again. That would be amazing, but you can't get everything. Or can you?
Andrew, you said? Newsweek, October 28th, 1946, last paragraph. Only Julius Streicher went without dignity. He had to be pushed across the floor, wild-eyed and screaming Heil Hitler. Mounting the steps, he cried out, and now I go to God. He stared at the witnesses facing the gallows and shouted, Purimfest, 1946. And Newsweek is kind enough to tell us that Purim is a Jewish feast. What should he have yelled out if he's going to yell anything out? It was the last day of Sukkot. He should have said Sukkah party. Purim is not for 6 months. Well, what's he doing? 5 months later is Purim. Why is he yelling out Purimfest? We asked him, but we really didn't because he was dead. Try to understand. Why would he do it? He says, we don't know. He's dead. It's interesting to note that he's yelling Purimfest. Almost as if to tell us, like, this is just a repeat of the whole story of Purim. And really, you got us over here. If we put this all together, what do we see? We see from the Talmud, Germania of Edom, linking them back, indeed, to Edom. That was Esav, that's the third battle. And then we have from the Purim story, that the third battle between Yaakov and Esav, from going to the land of Israel, is the Nazis, Yamach Shemon B'Zichram, where it comes out J3, E-Nil. And ultimately, like we said, we were looking for control. So let's put this all together. We started from the beginning very simply talking about this idea, something known as the concept of the fact that God runs the world. He really knows what's going on. He knows what's up. And the person can just chill. We got to do our style. Let's get put an effort. Do what we got to do. Realize the fact that the Purim story over there, every little word that's to be heard, because every little word, even thinking about different things, is still significant. And then we go to the give you a little example. Myself, a similar bottom of the storyline. The whole thing is just about the idea of the rules. It says, really, tell me the rules, tell me the law. Somebody got to do, tell me the instructions. Why get to know this idea? But this guy, the story is a brother and they hate him. Who really cares? The answer is because myself, a similar bottom. That's what happened to the fathers and sons. What's happened to the children? We go and give one example. Is that a little bit of famine and with Egypt, a little thing, and we go, lived great wealth. As he went to Yaakov and the son, but rather play out the millennia, and that's the story of what happened to Yaakov and Esau. And that's the 3 times Yaakov and Esau going to the land of Israel. Each time Yaakov come victorious, J1, J2, J3, E-Nil. And then we go to see the 3 things, the battles that we go after that, which is the last ones over here, and that is Amalek, Haman, and Nazis. Amalek, Boo, who's over there, they come on each one of them. There's descendants of it. Amalek, who we said over there, is his grandson, and his son, and his brother-in-law, and his stepson, and his father. Right, the idea of Haman, Boo, what's that over there is coming from Agag, what's an Agag, Agagite, and the last one is the Nazis. So we start with the idea of the Talmud, that's of Germania of Edom, the Gemara over there, and Megillah and Daf 6 Amud Aleph, or 6 Amud Aleph, Vav Amud Aleph, 6a and 6b at the bottom of the page, turning it over, beep, turn the page. Top of the thing over there, that'll be 6b of Germania of Edom, Zui Germania, and the last one of the Nazis, and then the question about it with the idea of Purim over there, and we're going to say, please, the Jews should do tomorrow, the 10th on the home, be hanged on the gallows, hit it with the Tav Shin Zayim, we get a big Vav, put it in 10 and 10, 11 and 11, and we're looking at the idea, Purim Fest. What's happening over there? My friends, the question over here is now is as follows. Now that we see that this is pretty straightforward, that the Lord Almighty knows what's up, and He has the control about this, and He knows what happened. If a book like this called the Torah, if it were to fall from the sky, every academic in the world would jump on it to try to see, like, what's this about? Guess what? It did fall from the sky. There's a holiday called Shavuos, another holiday which we should talk about because it's not Shavuos. And we were Zilcha, we merited to get such a book over here that comes and teaches us the words of Hashem. The question is, how much time and effort does it deserve? A day, a week, a month? I leave that up to you to decide. Once again, I want to thank the Stimlers for making this happen. We've been talking about this for a few years already, so it's amazing that this happens. Thank the Rabbi and Rebbetzin for allowing us to do it over here and make this such a beautiful event. And really, last and not least, I have to thank all of you for coming, because had you not come, this just simply would have been awkward. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Let us pray.